Okay, everybody, welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. It is Monday, May 20th, 6 p.m. And I'm going to call the roll for vacationing Addie Ballister. Council Vice President.
Here.
Mr. Cobb.
Present.
Mr. Posh.
Here.
Mr. Petrus.
Here.
Mr. Maddox.
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here.
Okay, and Kuda's here. So the first thing we're going to do is legislative review. And we don't have law director here yet, but we can go through as much as we can without them. The first piece of legislation, these are for consideration for adoption tonight on first reading. We have Resolution 083, which authorizes the mayor. It's basically a reauthorization of the mayor to enter into a agreement with Shaker, Richmond Heights, Southview, University Heights, to establish a mental health crisis assistance program. And just at any time, feel free to stop me. 084 is, oh, sorry, yes, go ahead.
Oh, you moved so that fast. Yeah.
I think it's great. Rate the program sounds wonderful. Just curious about the funding source, so we do have to put in some money.
Okay, well, we could ask,
Was it 14?
that's 083.
Right. No, I was thinking 14.
Good. Did I read that program is funded?
Mostly, yes,
Okay.
mostly. But there is a dollar amount of that.
Is it 14 something?
14,782 and 16,888
Right.
on page 2.
Law director's here.
Yeah, so Councilman Larson had a question about the funding for 083, 2024.
The $14,782. I don't know where it comes from.
Okay.
So let's re-ask the question if, either the mayor comes in or, I don't know, is the finance director coming tonight?
I don't know.
Because I thought the mayor, when they did the presentation, the mayor said that he didn't really need council's vote on this. So is it under the threshold of the 50,000?
Yeah, it's well under. But it's an intergovernmental cooperative agreement where there's sharing of authority of the various municipalities. Shaker's running the program for all 5, including the other 4.
Mm-hmm.
So under the Ohio Revised Code, certainly the recommended and in some ways required process is to have legislative authority approval.
Oh, okay.
So it's not driven in this case purely by it's not a purchase like of a vehicle that's under 50.
Okay. Understood.
And then 084 is street lighting, and 085, this is a re-up of parkways, grading, draining, curbing, paving, repaving, repairing, sweeping, and cleaning thereof, removing snow, those kind of things. Any questions on that?
Mr. President, we're just going to editorialize that these are the biennial assessments for a 2-year period. The rate hasn't changed in a number of cycles, so it's just a continuance.
Go ahead.
Just out of curiosity, do they ever reevaluate that, Director Hannah?
Yes, yeah. All the mechanics of that between public works or public properties and finance, I don't know, but they do.
Thanks.
And then for first readings only, 086, this is a resolution that we did last year because we take a break in July, City Council does. So this just reaffirms that we will not be meeting in the month of July. That's our vacation, basically. 087 is an ordinance amending chapter 711 for medical marijuana. And I assume recreational now that it's legal. And this legislation, from my understanding, Mr. Law Director, just simply comports our existing ordinances with our new state law.
So, yes, to an extent, but it relates really only to the licensing of cannabis businesses within the city. And so under the current code, the current chapter 711, there's only a medical marijuana license available. And this would provide for the recreational or adult use cannabis license as well as a dual use or a dual licensure situation. And the city currently has one medical marijuana dispensary.
One fee?
One
One
business.
business. Is it one fee?
It depends. I'm not sure what that means, but
Well, I'm assuming you have to have to get a license, you have a fee.
yeah, so the medical marijuana is 5,000. This is the proposed revised section 71104. Adult use is 10,000 and dual use is also proposed to be 10,000.
I see. Councilman Cobb?
Question, this is optional, is that correct, to allow the recreational sale
Yes.
versus the medical sale? And I don't know if this is worthy of having a hearing on this or some discussion. I'm just tossing that out there.
I see you nodding your head, Councilman.
I mean, it seems like it might be something that we might want to hear from residents on. Could be the case that they're really supportive, could be the case that there are mixed feelings. I have a gut feeling where people are, but, I don't think that it would necessarily hurt to provide that opportunity to people. Where's everyone?
So, let's see. I'm sorry, I moved this down.
Why are you smiling?
Cleveland Heights.
Yeah.
So would this be a hearing run by council or is this a hearing that would be run by staff?
Well,
How do those
typically it
things
would be
work?
run by council. And, because it's legislation that's before us. I'd be, since it's kind of like here for planning, it would be in your court.
Oh, for planning development?
Yeah. So you willing to put that on?
The council requires that.
Is there any particular timeline that the staff wants this passed by?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. I think as the council vice president was just speaking about committees, your next regular meeting is on June 3rd, right? And I think that the date, and I'll turn to Mr. Anderson to confirm, but the date that the licenses are expected to be ready to be applied for is June 7th, so that if this is intended to move forward, I think the administration, the staff's request would be that it be adopted and effective before June 7th. Is that
That's correct, yeah. And I would just add, we haven't had any problems with the medical marijuana dispensary as it is operating on Coventry. The state does very heavily regulate the industry and will continue to do so under the adult use program. The same setback requirements from parks, churches, libraries, things like that of 500 feet are still in place. Functionally, that we will end up with very limited opportunity to add multiple dispensaries to Cleveland Heights, because as you know, all of our neighborhoods and districts usually have churches and parks and libraries kind of in them.
Director Hanna, the June 7th date, was that something that we chose or is that something that was set by the state?
it's driven by the state.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought I may have incorporated that into one of the recitals. There was just a moment. Yeah, the Division of Cannabis Control under the Ohio Department of Commerce, in the second recital, it says that the applications for dual use licenses that would allow existing medical marijuana dispensaries like currently exist in Cleveland Heights to also sell adult use marijuana would be available not later than the 7th of June.
I'm willing to go forward without a public hearing because of the timeline, but I just had a question on the section 711.02 where it says license required. The order in which a person was interested in opening the dispensary would apply for the license from the State Division of Cannabis Control. So when they come with their application in hand, would you be requiring them to have a copy of their certificate at that point?
Yes, we required that previously and
All right,
we require the same now.
thank you.
So in reality, I believe we're referring to Amplify, they're the current provider. I mean, there's really no room for another dispensary. So would Amplify automatically be allowed to sell this based on the new state regulations if we were able to with this permitting license?
They do intend to apply for the dual use application.
But it involves an application to the state and then a license from the city if this is adopted.
Go ahead, Mayor.
I think to that point, Amplify may not at some point in the future be the only potential seller. But this would allow us to create a structure within which we have some approvals. And we would, I think, have the opportunity to work with Amplify to take a look at things like any additional security concerns or traffic concerns that might result from the change in clientele as well.
All right, well, I would just say, well, go ahead, Councilor.
Would there be a limit to the number of vendors that would be allowed to apply for it in our city?
I think I'll turn again to Brian Anderson, but I think it's driven by the setback restrictions and locational restrictions. And are there other
I believe then
another
once,
location?
so there's a finite number in the entire state. So
Yeah.
when they get applications, they will try to geographically disperse them anyway. So in addition to just the original citing of the 500-foot setback from all of those, sort of public community uses, I believe there is a radius, once a dispensary is established, that the next one has to be outside of as well. I'll have to double check what the final rules were, because the state was going back and forth up to last week still on what some of those were.
Okay.
So there isn't any scenario where there would be some proliferation of dispensaries throughout the city. There may end up being some that find real estate that works, but people have been looking since medical started in 2017, 18 and have not really found anything today.
Well, what I'm gonna do is I'll just make sure that, people that I talk to know about this. So if they wanna show up, if they have an opinion, at least they can, at the very least, they can come to a council meeting. And I would suggest that we, all do that as much as we can, because we don't want people to, we always want people to know as much as they can about what's on our agenda. Resolution 090 is, well, you know what, I'll give this to Councilman Petros, go ahead. This is your,
Okay, so as I shared previously, I thought through some ideas that might be able to help newly elected council members. So this is one particular piece of that, but while this is a starting point, we don't see this as, the end of it. So within the Administrative Services Committee, recently we talked about coming up with some ideas for an onboarding or training for newly elected council members, and that will be coming later in a separate ordinance.
okay, and for those watching, Chapter 111 are the kind of rules council runs itself by. Second readings, 070 is an ordinance authorizing and approving the presentation of the entertainment programs in Kane Park. And I hear ticket sales are going really well. Anybody have any questions about this one? Okay, 077 this is second readings. An ordinance approving the application filed by the mayor and authorizing the establishment of the designated outdoor refreshment area. We won't be voting on this tonight, but there is a public hearing on May 28th at 6 p.m. on, this legislation would allow people on Lee Road, businesses to go from one business to another with an open container. There are some rules and so forth. Any questions about this?
I would like to say that the legislation as written requires a review in 5 years. And I'd like to see us do one before the next season rolls around of this year's activities and perhaps get some data from the police department, see if there was any increase in nuisances or any things that affected.
So you're more or less proposing an amendment?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to get some input from Assistant Director Anderson on this, but I seem to remember sort of a more near constant assessment of how the program is going with police and the administration generally, with such recommendations for amendment to the DORA, even through, well before that 5 year. There's already sort of a monthly check-in to weigh in on those sorts of things. You'd be putting sort of an additional burden on council. If you'd like, you're welcome to do so, but it doesn't mean the council can't amend it well before that 5 year. But if council chooses to, I'm sorry, and Director Zamp has a bit more input too.
Yeah, and I think in the conversations we had with other people who had adopted DORA throughout the state, particularly in the first go round, they tend to revisit it that first year because usually there's a business or there's a boundary that they want to expand or contract that usually expand. So I think it's almost likely that we would within a year probably be having a conversation with you about the DORA anyway. And we know there's some desire to expand this further, but this is phase 1.
Law Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just going to mention that if you look at that section 5, it references revised code section 4301.82H1. And that provision of the Ohio Revised Code says that 5 years after the date of creation of the outdoor refreshment area, the legislative authority of the municipality that created the DORA shall review the operation of the area and shall either approve the continued operation of the area or dissolve it. So at the 5 year mark, there is a mandatory obligation upon city council to take some action to either allow it to continue or to dissolve it. And there's a public notice of that process that's required as well. Which doesn't mean you can't look at things on this ongoing basis, but I think that this sort of milestone is required.
If there's an ongoing evaluation that you're doing in your department, could we ask for it? Could President Kuda ask for it to be brought to council so we could, like at the end of the season this summer?
I think that would make sense.
I'd just like to know. I think it's gonna go well, but
Yeah. No, but thanks for looking out for that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on. 078, ordinance authorizing the mayor to take all actions necessary to apply for and accept one or more Northeastern Ohio Public Energy Council 2024 energized community grants. Pretty straightforward
and recurring.
and recurring. Thank you. 079, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a third amendment to an agreement for the sale of real property. So this has to do with Nobility Court. And 080 is ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a development agreement with TWG. Any further questions on the development agreement? I know we had a pretty robust discussion about this 2 weeks ago, but if there's anything else? Look at the new guy.
Yeah, the new guy.
Well, I mean,
Should I pour my heart out and tell you that I'm gonna support it because, and why?
well, you could do that when we're out there.
Okay.
That's nice to know. Okay, let's see, I'm sorry. Yeah. All right, the consent agenda. That is a resolution declaring June 2024 to be LGBTQ plus Pride Month. And 089 is a resolution proclaiming June 7th to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Anything there? Yes.
Two small things. One, I noticed that my ordinance, while it's in the packet that Addie sent to us, it's not in the packet that was posted on the website.
Oh,
So I guess, should I make a motion during the council meeting to amend the agenda to add it
Jenny.
for first reading?
Is it not on the agenda online or is it?
Correct, it's not
in
on the
packet?
agenda online.
Okay. I mean, it is on the agenda, but I think it can't hurt to make a motion to amend the agenda under that section at the beginning of the meeting to amend it.
The other thing, so we were talking about the legislative process. And since we last discussed that, some ideas came to mind for me for how we might be able to make the process more effective, efficient, and reached out to President Kuda to see if we might be able to just have a second reading on it today and not vote
Please
on it.
excuse me, I did skip over that accidentally. That's 082. Thank you.
And so I am grateful that he was willing to allow us just to have a second reading. And I offered to sit down with Addie after this meeting so that we could draft up some of those ideas and share it with
Right.
the rest of the group.
No pressure here, but could you briefly state what it is you wanna, do with this massage of the,
Yeah, I think that, looking at what was attached, I just moved around some things that I think would make it a little smoother. And so rather than just moving them around and bringing that same document here, I thought that some of the wording might benefit from being, rewritten, massaged a little bit for clarity. So that's what I'm going to do so that it's clear.
so is it possible that we could get this to Law Director Hannah before Thursday? I know that's a lot to ask.
I
But
think so.
that's when we usually discuss this kind of stuff.
Does Addie come back tomorrow?
She's back tomorrow, yeah.
So I think we should probably have time
Okay,
if she happens to have.
thank you, appreciate it. Is everybody okay with not voting on this today? Just to, so we can clean up the page. Okay, very good. So no questions on the consent agenda. Then what we're gonna do now, that concludes our legislative review. We're gonna go into executive session. Do I have a motion to do that?
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session to consider the appointment of a public official.
Second.
Discussion? I'm gonna call the roll. Council Vice President Russell,
Here.
Cobb,
Aye.
Posh,
Yes.
Petrus,
Yes.
Maddox.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Kuda, aye. The ayes have it. Okay, we're back from executive session, or at least almost back. Councilman Cobb just stepped out of the room. And we're gonna continue on with the agenda. The next thing is to discuss council's economic development process.
Apparently, the mayor would like to have another executive session on real estate.
Oh, okay.
Like to make a motion.
Speak for him.
I guess we would have to do that as a separate.
Bless you.
Mary, did you wanna make some kind of a motion?
No, I cannot.
Okay.
However, I can ask the committee to enter into another executive session to discuss the purchase of property for public purpose and the request for economic development incentives under Ohio Revised Code 5709.
Some council person needs to repeat that, I think.
I didn't get it all. Say that again.
I think you could just do so moved.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
All right, I'll call, any discussion? I'll call the roll. Council Vice President Russell. Councilman Cobb.
Aye.
Posh.
Yes.
Petrus.
Yes.
Mannix.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Kuda, aye. Okay, we're back in executive session. Okay, we are back from our second executive session, and we're gonna move on down the agenda here. The next item is this economic development discussion that we've been having. You know, council leadership's been discussing this. What we wanna do is have a mutual understanding within council and a mutual understanding with the administration about council's role in economic development projects and, you know, future development agreements. We're not gonna have a resolution. I don't plan on having a resolution or a vote on this. These are just council leadership's recommendations for a framework. And hopefully this will help ensure that all parties will be on the same page. We do know from last year that just having an experienced developer and, you know, experienced planning staff, that doesn't in itself guarantee success. And we just want to kind of help that be more likely. As I said a couple of weeks ago, when we look at development agreements from the beginning to the end, it's a complicated process. You know, most people on council are, you know, kind of lay people, if you will, with development, and but we are asked to evaluate these projects, and we want to make sure that we do our due diligence. And we don't ever want residents saying, you know, hey, you know, you didn't bring us in until this was a done deal, or that kind of thing. So basically, the main tenets of this are that upfront, that council members examine a site when we're given an MOU or a purchase agreement, that we go out and we look at the site. That after we vote on a purchase agreement or an MOU, that hopefully staff can give us some kind of timeline. You know, here's what's going to happen over the next several months. And that we get regular project updates. And if there are multiple public engagement opportunities, and council is always informed of those public engagement opportunities. I know the law director has advised us, and obviously rightfully so, that if we do attend those, we don't engage in any kind of way that could possibly create an open meeting violation. But it's always good to listen, for us to listen to what people are saying, and that our inquiry, all of our questions are answered at the end of the line when we're asked to vote on a development agreement. And if we are in agreement that this is a very standard process, and that this can only help ensure the symbiotic relationship between the two branches of government and make development agreements more likely, I think it's just good. Just like we talked through the legislative process, and as we talked about it, we realized that there were things that we did need to flush out. I would say this is the same thing. This is at least as complex. And so, why don't we go around the room? Anybody? Council Vice President Russell, anything to say?
No, I think we should have more understanding process between council and a framework, and I think being updated on various periods of times on different agreements and things that's coming forward with different projects. All it does is just educate all of council more on what development is and means more for success.
Councilman Cobb?
I agree that there should be a process. I shared with everyone this afternoon, and I'll have Addie post it. The timelines that were taken from Top of the Hill and Cedar Lee Meadowbrook, two pretty extensive projects. And I just want to highlight the fact that we had a memorandum of understanding, and that was followed by a purchase agreement within 6 or 7 months. And then after that was when the planning commission typically met to review it, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Architectural Review Board. I just don't want us to have any process where we are involved in micromanaging the underlying process. And I think we as council need to understand that when we authorize the mayor to sign that MOU, that needs to be a commitment from this council that this deal is largely going to happen as it is, and it's our commitment. And so the time to speak up if we have problems going forward is at the time or before this MOU is authorized, and not afterwards. And we cannot delay the execution of a purchase agreement, because delay is dollars as far as the developers are. And I believe the time for us to discuss the process about what we're going to do, we need to be fluid, and that needs to occur upfront. And, the past is the past. And so I think it is good that we're having a process. I just asked us to be fluid and have an understanding upfront about what's going to happen, so the developer has clear expectations, and we don't do anything again to micromanage that project between the time of the MOU signing and when the purchase agreement needs to get signed.
So I'm going to call him Councilman Tosh next, but just so I understand you, and I agree with you. Once we sign that, the credibility of the city is on the line, and only in extreme circumstances do I believe that council should, later on, have to be something catastrophic happening in between the two agreements. But so I'm just surmising from what you said, Councilman Cobb, that public engagement probably needs to happen right up front, so that we get that part out of the way. We don't, because that's the kind of thing that can come to bite you later on. Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilman.
Well, I think this is the kind of expectations from both sides, from both branches of governments, that the city can use to sell itself as we are open for economic development.
That's right.
And if you ever questions on the fact that, hey, look, you brought someone forward and it didn't even pass, and we don't want to waste our time. I mean, I think this is going to nip it in the bud. The only thing I would suggest is possibly kind of a precursor item. Say you look at it like an item 0, which is basically a deal flow. So I would think that the expectation is from council leadership, the mayor's office, and our vice presidents, that there is some sharing of information, even before it gets to us, about, hey, this is coming down the pike. So there's just.
I'm sorry, a deal flow.
So there's some deal flow which I would expect is being worked on. These are the projects that are that we're working on. Okay, we don't need your involvement yet. Okay, and this is something that council doesn't even see, but council leadership should see in their ongoing conversations with the mayor's office.
Well, actually, the planning department has really been good about that. We get kind of like a heads up, like we're looking at stuff. Am I saying this right, Director Zam? That we've been in executive session and kind of like just talked about looking forward. I'm not getting into any specifics, but just that we do get those heads up. And I think that's kind of covers what you said.
That satisfies what I was thinking.
Councilman Petrus?
As I said before, I support this in principle, and because we are not passing this as a resolution, it gives us a lot of flexibility so that it can fit the situation. And so,
And that's the idea, you know, this is a framework, this is not, you gotta do this and you gotta do it at this time. But these are the general expectations we have and a, you know, kind of methodical look at what works. Yeah.
Thank you. Couple of things. I still strongly disagree with the fact that we're only looking at this process but not educating ourselves. So that's number one. Number two, just to your comment, my expectation is that I am never getting updated from the council leadership about something. I'm a lone council person in a group. So my expectation is that any presentations that this leadership gets, that we should all be getting. And so I'm not going to get my information secondhand. So my expectation is that the administration will continue to let the entire council know what's coming down the pipe. That for me, that's just extremely helpful. So that's how I'll continue to communicate it. So I just want to make that clear. That for me would not be acceptable at all. Continue
What's
to
the
update.
that? I don't know what.
You all getting updates on things that are coming and then giving us that information.
Oh,
So that's, so I
but that's not the way we operate. So.
absolutely. So just the second thing with this is, I just want to make sure that this doesn't, because in the past, with the multiple projects recently, we have stepped on the toes of some of the boards and commissions, and we've gotten involved in some things that council typically does not get. One of the things that I expressed when I got on council is that the packet that planning commission gets for a project is much more robust than what council gets. Maybe it is the fact that council needs to take a look at that packet to get more educated on some of this information. It would be helpful. But I just want to make sure that we are not minimizing the knowledge and information that our boards and commissions are getting when they're making these decisions. Because in some cases, it looks like we're trying to intervene to make sure that the public is protected, when the goal of these boards and commissions is to do exactly that. And so I just want to make sure that they're still able to do their job. The other thing that I want to make really important is you want to be very careful how much public input you get at the beginning of a project when things have not even been fleshed out. That was the mistake that we made in multiple projects, so that people began to panic before they even got specifics about design. And so we want to be very careful in terms of what our expectations are at the point of an MOU, in terms of what we should be seeing and what's happening with a project versus what we want to see. And I don't want us holding up a project because we're expecting a developer to present more at the time of that initial discussion than should be expected, because we want to protect some of the panic from the public. And so I just want to make that clear, that many of the expectations that we've had in terms of when these MOUs are created are things that we shouldn't have been looking for until weeks or months down the road, but we weren't aware of that. And so again, if we're going to follow this process, I just still think there needs to be some level of accountability and understanding about the process itself. Ask those questions, but this council should not be expecting a black and white hard timeline for all projects to work the same. So if this, I don't want us to use this tool in terms of any level of accountability, because every project is going to be quite different. But again, I can't express to this council the importance enough of understanding that workflow and understanding how these projects move, and maybe even taking a look at some of those packets of information. Because again, a lot of what we're asking for would have been fleshed out in our boards and commissions, but we're jumping forward and we're kind of moving faster than we need to, and that's created some miscommunication. And so I'm looking at these steps in general, but I just kind of want to make that clear that this can't be a hard rule.
Okay, and that's the whole point of this. Let's get a general framework, because, as you said, a lot of these development deals are quite different. And then I just want to add, quite to the contrary of what you just said about the Planning Commission and the ADR. That's exactly, well, I mean, I can't speak for everybody here, but that's exactly where I go to get the expert information. And when I see 5 people shaking their heads at different meetings and going, no, this isn't working. When I see staff saying you need to do this, and this, and it's not done, I'm listening to that. And I can tell you, at least on one project, I saw a night and day difference, and that was very, I use that as my bellwether because, you know, I respect them and I respect their expertise, and I think that they're you know, very important part of the process. Go ahead.
I wasn't finished.
Oh, geez, it seemed like you were.
Nope. So I want to use this as an
We need to
example.
go quickly. We're running out of time.
I waited for everyone to go around this table. I'm not going to rush myself. My question is, as an example, does this council know what it should be expecting to see at the time of an MOU? what information should actually be provided from the administration at the time of the MOU. Because if we don't understand that, we'll go in blind and then we'll be expecting things we shouldn't. So again, this goes back to the educational piece. Do we know what we should be looking at in terms of the purchase agreement and the timelines? Do we recognize when they're bringing something to the table when something else should happen? Because giving this information without understanding what we should be expecting at the time isn't going to help. So if this council doesn't know something as simple as what information should we be receiving at the time of the MOU, this isn't going to be helpful if we still don't understand the underpinning processes and information that needs to take place. And so I still think this council needs to spend some time asking those questions. Otherwise, we're still going to receive some frustration, because it's great if if council votes on the MOU and it's 0.4, we're doing a review. But what if this council is expecting something at the time of 0.4 that they should not be? And that's what I want to flesh out. I just want to make sure that we have an understanding of what we should have in front of us at the time.
Well, two things. One is the expectations are very general here. And secondly, this council, I mean, I don't know, I don't know how we could differ on this part. This council does their homework and asks questions. I don't see a lack of curiosity or a lack of questions or a lack of depth in the questions. And certainly anybody who has any expertise in any area, and it doesn't necessarily, I mean, we're talking about planning and development right now, but in any area, I'm glad to see, and hear, I constantly hear, stuff that people know more about than other people. Depends on what the topic is. And that's why we have 7 people on council. All right, Councilwoman Larson.
What's left to say is this is a huge part of our jobs, and it's challenging, and it's on us to make sure we have all the information that we need. If Councilor Maddox, when we have our next MOU, if you have some things that you can share with us in terms of training to understand, where they are at that point. We talk about training. We talk about giving us the tools that we need to analyze this process as it goes through. So as you said, our expectations are early in the process. We should perhaps be looking more carefully at other items on that MOU. So I want to learn, but I also want to make sure that we're getting information on a timely basis, and I want to make sure that the community is engaged as we go along.
And you know what, this is a great thing that we're talking about this, because we're talking about this because the mayor is very focused on economic development. Planning department is constantly getting things going, and this is great that we need to be talking about this because more stuff is coming our way quickly, because we have.
I just wanted to sort of remind council, so certainty, whether it's certainty of expectations for you, for the planning staff and the administration, and for the developer, and for the public is really important. We had spoken a little bit last time, I think it was Councilman Cobb, about bringing some other voices into the room. The mayor had reached out to the Urban Land Institute to see if they could come and talk to you. We've been speaking to community development advisors. And in fact, with the last council president, we had suggested maybe having sort of standalone session to talk about this, because before you set your expectations, I think you need to hear from some people who are going to have to go through that process and what these expectations may mean, unintended consequences and maybe intended consequences. So I would just urge you, before you assume this, that we have that conversation with some other.
Again, we're not voting, and certainly, you can send me any reactions you have to anything that's specific in here, although, like I said, it's very general. And when you came to the planning committee meeting and explained the process that you go through with the developer, maybe that's something you might want to do in a committee of the whole meeting. If you think that would help.
And if we could bring some other people to join in that conversation.
Sure, that's possible. Go ahead.
And also, I've started that process in the planning, I don't want to get it right. I've also started that process in the planning committee, where we are getting presentations and workshops on various different things. I've talked to Bill about a development agreement that just wasn't a real development agreement, but to go through it and all those different things. We've talked about even having a CBG training and asking staff and other people who are around the table to do training who are in their expertise for different things. So we've in the process of starting doing those things too, as well as the planning committee.
I guess we're just confused with it now because it seems like the entire council, committee of the whole wants to have this.
Well, that's fine. That would be great.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Great.
And
Quickly, please.
to
Be
your
great.
point, that's exactly, because you can't have any accountability where there's no knowledge. And so if we're going to do this, there has to be something as a buffer. I just don't want us to get into a room and there's any kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication between us and administration because we've set this standard, but we don't have any understanding, and it looks like because it's veered off of this, that something has went left. If there's some knowledge to go along with it, then there can be accountability. But the council can't hold anything accountable or oversee a project with no knowledge of that process. And that's what I wanted to make sure, because in the past, that's been a frustration. We've tried to have a level of accountability in areas where there wasn't quite enough knowledge to be able to articulate our role and what we needed to do.
So yeah, I've started that process, and hopefully all council will participate in that. It's just going to be maybe every other month where we'll have a training session and someone will come in, we'll talk to the mayor, see if staff could do it in their expertise, or ask outside people to come in and give their expertise, even with the law director, to make sure everybody's on the same page, because my goal definitely is not to infringe on what staff is supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be doing it, or stopping ways for developers to come in, because I also want to hear from developers. What's hard about Cleveland Heights? What would you like to see? Because we have to do some zoning changes. We need to do some things like that to make sure that we are able to build some different things.
All right, thank you, Council Vice President. Yeah, where we at?
I know. 15 seconds. When you do that and you have those training sessions, please let us all know.
Yes,
Because
I
I
will.
don't always go to all the committee meetings anymore.
I will put it as a presentation.
All right, thank you.
And send it to all council,
Yes.
even though it's a committee.
And it kind of be every other month. I'm trying to do it every other month, because 1 month will be based on whatever legislation is coming up that we can discuss.
Okay, we're gonna skip the mayor's update, which I'm sure he's gonna do when he's out there in the regular meeting. And so we need to schedule a committee of the whole meeting, probably 2 of them in June, regarding the Charter Review Commission recommendations. I mean, Addie's not here, but you know, I would suggest the first, like later in the first week or the second week.
Yes.
Because we're, you know, I don't think there's any appetite to schedule things after June 17th. I have a couple of questions. One is, do you have does anyone, is anyone okay with the idea of having a person, probably Linda Strayevsky, come in and present their recommendations to us in a meeting where we discuss it afterwards? Because that discussion could be an hour or something. And then the second discussion we need to have is, how do we want to move forward with these recommendations, and what kind of timeline do we want to get on? And there's a lot of variables. I mean, you know, if we want to get it on the ballot in November, there's that timeline. If we want to, I actually don't want to get into the variables right now, but we need to do that when we get into a meeting to discuss this process. Yeah.
President Kuda, before you move along, I just, for our purposes in the administration, what is the June 17th?
Well, that's our last meeting in June.
Okay.
That's council's last meeting in June, last scheduled meeting. So I'm just trying to figure out
He's trying to do it before.
how
that
we can get our work done before,
I get,
Go ahead.
but we're taking a July recess,
correct.
but we're gonna cut off half of June at June 17th.
I'm just talking about what's scheduled. I'm not
Okay.
talking about cutting anything.
Okay.
I mean, we ordinarily would not meet after June 17th in, you know, for a regular meeting.
So that's why I asked.
Understood.
I know for our purposes, we might have things that need to come up, and if council is going on recess, we might need to preload some things at the end of June.
If something comes up, we'll deal with it. I mean, I'm not saying we won't. I'm just saying for this,
For
we should,
additional meetings.
let's not push this off to the end of the month, because then we could, who knows what we're gonna be dealing with. Plus, this charter review thing is very time sensitive. I mean, so,
It's a lot.
tell me what, if you wanna do the meeting, a special, they're gonna be special meetings. And they're gonna be committee of the whole meetings. Do you wanna do it on the same day where you have a presentation by the Charter Review Commission and a discussion with the seven of us on how we wanna proceed with the recommendations?
So I guess that's my first question to ask you.
Sure.
Based on what I'm hearing now, is there just a blanket assumption that we are gonna put something on the ballot? Because
No.
that's the way it's been communicated just now to me.
I'm
That's
not
what
communicating, that's not what I'm communicating.
Okay, I just want,
I'm saying there's a lot of options and we need to look at them.
okay, I just don't want us to build a timeline with this assumption that we're just gonna put something on the ballot without that discussion. So if we're gonna build a timeline around that, I feel very uncomfortable with it.
I didn't
That's
do
why
that.
I just wanted to make, I know what I heard, that's why I'm asking for clarity.
Yeah.
So you can be irritated with all, but that's why I'm asking the question.
Nobody's irritated.
That
So-
it is, because I know what I'm hearing.
So
I know what
we-
I'm sitting next to. So my question is, what the expectations that we're gonna get this information, we're gonna get this presentation, and we're
Right.
gonna discuss if we want to put something on the
So
ballot.
May 31st, they have to give us the recommendations or they have to ask for an extension.
Right.
They've said, the Charter Review Commission said, we're gonna be done. So given that they're gonna be done on May 31st, let's pick a day. Again, first of all, do you wanna do those two things on the same day? Presentation by the Charter Review Commission and discussion.
I think
Please.
that makes sense while it is fresh in our minds.
Okay. Anybody else?
I agree.
Okay, so, I can have Addie reach out to the chair and look for dates. Do we have any, could we,
You
I
said
mean,
the
I
first
think
2
we're gonna
weeks.
need 2 to 3 hours to do this.
You said
I
the
don't
first 2
see-
weeks,
Yeah,
so do we have a lot of time? Okay.
If it would work for other people, I'd request that it not be during regular business hours, that it be in the evening or on the weekend.
I'm okay with evenings.
Yep.
And, I'm okay with the weekend, but I don't know, then staff has to come in.
And we're only asking for her to present?
No, I'm just gonna
Because I'd like to
say,
hear from more.
I'm gonna ask the chair, who she'd like to bring, if you have any special requests, you want.
Yeah, I would rather that they open it up, not her decide who's coming, but whoever from the commission would like to speak, to do that.
So you want us to invite anybody from the
From that
commission?
commission to come and share that information, absolutely. I wouldn't want to hear that secondhand from somebody else or have that formulated if they have something they want to share. I would want to make sure that at least they have the opportunity to speak up if they did, versus not being able to have that option at all.
I'm okay with that.
Well, she's the chair, I'm quite sure she would know what she wants to do and how she want to do it and talk to the team, wouldn't she?
Well, but.
Yeah, I'm not interested in what she wants. I'm interested in hearing from the commission
No,
itself.
I'm not saying that, I'm just saying if we made her the chair and she's the chair of the committee, then she needs to be able to bring her committee and say, hey, council, I want all of you here, or to set the boundaries and, the information, that's all I'm saying, I'm just saying if we elected her as the chair.
Yeah, as long as we don't have any boundaries in terms of who can and can't come speak to us, I'm fine with that.
I would hope that wouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Anthony, I think you're saying that you don't necessarily want something scripted that the majority of the commission has come up with. You want to be able to make it open to all 9 members, because maybe there's a dissenting opinion that
Absolutely.
you may want to hear.
Yep, absolutely.
I agree.
June 13th, we are all in Democracy Day, so that is one day that I should stay away from when she's
Yeah.
scheduling.
Any other days, I mean,
You said the first week,
Andy will set out a doodle poll, but I mean, is there, are we agreed evenings?
That's fine.
Evenings, and everybody's prepared, let's just say,
the 10th,
for a 3-hour meeting, if that ends up being what it is.
about the 10th?
And we do need the law director there. So we've got
Oh,
three entities, kind of like us and the Charter Review Commission and Bill Hanna.
I like being an entity.
You're an entity. You're an important entity, I think go that far. I guess we don't have to actually, decide the date, but are
she
there
can
any,
do a doodle poll.
anybody got blockout dates that I can give her?
The 6th through the 10th.
You can't be here June 6th or 10th.
I'll rework everything else.
Okay. And I'm sorry, Gail, you said 13th?
13th.
Okay. I mean, that's good, just gives her a,
Doodle poll.
yeah, it just gives her a framework. Okay, yes,
Yeah, we talked about doing another meeting on ARPA with Guidehouse, so did you wanna talk about that tonight or just send out a doodle or,
briefly,
sorry?
that's okay. We're thinking about having PreemCon brief council in a committee of the whole meeting on, kind of a ARPA update, so to speak.
Next council meeting?
Yeah, the next council.
We'll do it then on the 3rd.
Any concerns about that or? Okay. Any other orders of business?
Before you go on, will you have Addie schedule that in on the agenda then?
Yes.
Please.
Anything else? All right, we are adjourned and we'll be going to the regular meeting.